much as 2 inches or even 2.5. It really depends on the style that you want to come up with. You can use as little as 1 inch or 1.5 inches, but we'll just hold the middle line. We'll use 1/3 of an inch. So that means if I'm using 1/3 of an inch both sides, if I add that together, that will give me 3.5 inches. That's 1/3 plus 1/3 is 3.5 inches. So I subtract 3.5 inches, and what I get is 19 inches. And that is the length of my collar. That's the total length of the collar. Now, I would now, first of all, divide this into two because I want to fold my paper into two, and I'm going to curve it out. So, but because I need to fold my paper, I need to divide this into two. This will give me 9.5 inches. That's 9.5 inches, because 90 divided by 2 is 9.5 inches. Now, this is my fold. Now, this is the length, actually. We haven't talked about the height. Now, the height shouldn't really be more than 4 inches. You can use less than that. You can use 3.5. You can use, you know, maybe 3¼ but really shouldn't go beyond 4 inches. So the height will be 4 inches. So we need to cut out a strip that is 19 inches by 4 inches. Now there's something about the color we're making that's really going to be curved at a particular point. So because of that curve, we need to reduce this 9.5 by 1 or by 3/4, as the case may be, but we're going to reduce it by 1 to curve it out. So by the time we're done with curving it out, we will now check the measurement to be sure that we have 9.5 or 19 inches, as the case may be. So this is my strip. I'll subtract 1 here, and that will give me 8.5. That's just to draft out the pattern. So this is my strip. I need to cut out a strip that is, first of all, 17 inches by 4 inches. I fold that into two. This is the fold. So the first thing I do will be to come to this edge. This is 4 inches, so don't forget. I come to this edge and measure 1 inch inward, like that. I'll now take my tape rule on the piece of paper and mark out where the length of my lapel edge, we have chosen 1/3, so I'll measure that out to check where that rests on the paper. So maybe this is where it gets to. I'll now slant it down there, and I'll curve this, you know, towards the midpoint or shortly after the midpoint. You can see that. Now I'll come to the middle here and measure 1 inch down and curve this to this point here. So this is the color how it is. I will now take my tape rule after I'm done and measure it to be sure it will give me 9.5 inches, and that's what we're really looking for. But because of the curve, if we had used 9.5 inches, it will be longer than what you really want. So now that we've done our pattern, so let's go to the table and now draft it out, cut it out, iron it, and then fix it. So let's go to the table. We'll take our paper and we'll fold it into two, this way. You can decide to cut out a strip of 4 inches by 17 inches, or you could just decide to work it out as I'm about to work it out now. So I'll measure 4 inches. Draw the line. Okay, I'll now measure out the 8.5 inches. So I'll now measure out 1 inch on top here. Now check where my 1/3 lands. That's my 1/3 here. So after that, I will now curve it. I'll curve it like that. Now measure my 1 inch here. Good. So we'll now check this measurement to be sure that this will give us. Don't forget that the measurement we're looking for is 19 inches. And if you divide that into 2, that's 9.5 inches. So I'm going to check that out here at the base, just to be sure. This is almost 19.5 inches. This is supposed to be 9.5. So we'll just add it to increase it, just gently, like I told you. It's better to be short so that you don't get it too long. And just extend it by 1/4 inch. Okay, so let's check it again. It's 9.5 inches now. And it will check the lapel edge to be sure it's okay. This is supposed to be 1/3. So we're cool with that. So you pin it in place and cut it out. So what you can do is that you can actually, instead of subtracting 1 inch, you can subtract 3/4 inch. That means that you cut out a piece that's 8/3 of an inch. That will give you 8/3 of an inch. Okay, so what we have here is, yeah, 9.5. So I'm going to cut out this piece with, I'm going to use it to cut out my collar stain. Okay, now we've cut it out. What we'll do next will be to iron it on top of our fabric, and then we'll meet at the machine to sew it. So now we have ironed it out on our fabric, and we have cut out our seam allowance around it, and we have also cut another piece that will be underneath it like that. So I place them together, and I'm going to sew the top alone for now. I'll make sure that I sew a little bit away from the collar, so just slightly away, like 1 millimeter away from it. So I will notch it all the way. Okay, I'll remove the pins. Now top stitch on the piece that's underneath the collar. So I just cut that off there. So I'll now turn this, stitch this one down properly. Yeah. So I'll now take this part and turn it down this way and sew off this place. You can see that it's already been sewn down here. You can see that here. So I'll now sew this place. That's the edge of the collar. Sew by the side. Remove the excess. Remove the excess, trim it off like that. And we turn to the right side. Use the edge of your scissors. Oops, I did that too much, so I have to stitch that back. That's what happens if you poke it out too much. So, yeah. So I have to be gentler when I'm doing that the next time. Just turn it gently. You can use your finger. There's another way to just do that, and then you get it out that way. Can you see that? So I'll just use my pins to hold it down. You can actually tack that if you want, or iron it out before pinning it. So I'm pinning it there. So we'll keep on pinning that way. This is to keep the this is to keep the collar in place. So you can see that because of the way we pinned it, we have a little excess coming out from underneath it. Good. So I'll trim that little excess off. That's a slight excess. It's not so much. Okay, so after trimming that, I'll now check the edges to be sure that it's equal, because you don't want one looking longer. This looks slightly longer, so I'll trim a little bit off that, because 1/8 can make a huge difference in the way a color looks. So trim that down. Check it, take a look at it again. Yeah, it's equal. So once I've done that, okay, that's giving us what we want. So I'll get the midpoint. So this place I have notched now is my midpoint. So now we've pinned this up like this, and we've gotten the midpoint. So the next thing is that we'll get the midpoint of the neckline too. Well, most times we always assume that the line at the back should be the midpoint, but you know, at times due to a lot of shifting and sewing and stuff like that, it might not necessarily be the midpoint. So you need to place this together at the two. Place the two edges together, then now begin to take it to the back till we get the midpoint. Just like I told you, just a slight shift, you see that? Very slight, not much. But like I always say, 1/8 of an inch makes a whole lot of difference. You can see that this is the middle, and this is where my center is. It's just like 1/8 of an inch difference. So I need to use that point as my midpoint. You can see that this is where my notch rests, just like 1/8 away. It doesn't matter. Just to ensure that you get it as accurate as possible. So I'm going to turn the jacket back to the wrong side because of the way we're going to sew it. We need to sew it. We need to insert the collar and sew it in. So we'll turn it back to the right side, to the wrong side. We're almost done. So this is my midpoint here. I have marked. You can see it here. This is how it's going to be. The collar is going to sit this way. This is how it's going to sit all along the edge. So you need to understand that. So this is how we're going to place it. The side that doesn't have collar stay would be facing the back this way. So we pin it there. So once we pin the middle, we now begin to pin it all the way to the sides. So what I need to do is to ensure that I get this edge equidistant. Okay, I'm just trying to ensure that it comes out equal by the time I finish sewing it. So I pin it in place to be sure. I'm trying to get from this edge 1/3 of an inch. I'm getting from here, I've got my 1/3 here. So I go right away to ensure the same at the other side. This is how it will be folded. Okay. I've gotten it equal now. So now pin it in place. For whatever you're doing, equidistance is very important because you don't want one side looking bigger than the other side. That won't look professional enough. So now I'm going to stitch it down first, so that I can remove all the pins and then pin it back. Okay, so now I can remove my pins and pin it up properly. So now take all these edges and pin them up properly. So now we can now stitch it once we're done with pinning. So I will now pinch this, pin it in place. Okay, now we can sew. I'm going to stitch 1/4 of an inch. So now that we've done this, we've sewn it all round the neckline. We'll remove the excess that's there. Remove the excess, the bulk, and then we will notch it all through the neckline. So we're going to turn it back to the right side. We're going to turn it through our armhole. You can see it's the same. So we have sewn the edges now. You can see the distance. They need to be the same. Now one more thing we're going to do will be to top stitch together. This, like you can see that this is looking bulky here. Not really bulky, just that it's moving and shifting. So we need to top stitch it down so that it doesn't move around and it rests well. So I'm going to pull it very well. I'm top stitching both layers together. That's the body and the lining. So I'll pin that there. I'll start from like 1.5 inches from the edge of the shoulder and end like 1.5 inches after the edge of the shoulder. So I'm pulling it so that there are no folds. You can iron that out soon so that you're sure of that. So I'll start like 1.5 inches before the shoulder here. Let me make it 2 inches. Stop around 2 inches there. So removing all the excess threads around there.